4, and let's do the questions at the end of chapter 4 that are going to be applicable to the quiz. Let me get my book as well as showing you on the screen. So if we start with the multiple choice, okay, we are only interested in 1 through 8. 1 through 8. So let's look at those. What kind of controlled loop uses a true-false condition to control the number of times it repeats? A condition. A condition-controlled loop. 1B. 2. A blank-controlled loop repeats a specific number of times. A count-controlled loop. D. 2D. Each repetition of a loop is known as an iteration. D. The while loop is a pretest type of loop. A. 4A. What kind of loop has no way of ending and repeats until the program is interrupted? Infinite. C. 5C. The minus equals operator is known as an augmented assignment. 6B. 6B. What variable keeps a running total? That's accumulator. 7D. Accumulator. 8. It's a special value that signals when there are no more items from a list to be processed. A. Sentinel. 8A. So as I said, we're doing 1 through 8. We're not going to do 9 or 10 or 11 or 12. Okay. All right. So if we look at the true false then, we'll do 1. A condition controlled loop always repeats a specific number of times. That's false. A count controlled loop repeats a specific number of times, but a condition controlled loop, it depends on the condition. So that's false. 2. The while loop is a pretest loop. That's true. That was up there as one of the questions. While loop is a pretest loop because you're testing the condition before you go into the loop, meaning pre-loop, okay? The following statement subtracts 1 from x. X equals x minus 1. Absolutely true. 4. It is not necessary to initialize accumulator variables. That's false. Remember, every time we do an accumulation, we have like the variable total. We always set it to 0 to start out with. 4, false. 5. In a nested loop, the inner loop goes through all of its iterations for every single iteration of the outer loop. That's true. So if you have a loop, for loop, range 5, and inside that you have another for loop, range 5, you just multiply the 5s together and you get 25. Okay. We did something similar to this when we did that problem at the end of the chapter where we printed, what, 10 rows of 15 hashtags? That was that type of problem. Let's see. To calculate the total number of iterations of a nested loop, add the number of iterations. No, I just said multiply the number of iterations. This is false. We're not doing 7. Now, we already did some of these workbench numbers. Let's see. The number should be multiplied by 10 and all right, so let's look at that. We're going to look at algorithm workbench 1. Okay. So I want to develop the product. So usually we've developed the total of something, so everything starts at 0. But if you're going to develop the product of something, it better start with 1. So when you multiply it, you have a value. If you start product at 0 and you multiply by 0, you'll always have 0. All right. So the user's going to enter a number. And our condition is while product is less than 100. We're going to get the number. We're going to multiply product. By 10, the result assigned to written product. There you go. Okay. The product should iterate as long as product is less than 100. The number should be multiplied by 10 and the result assigned to a variable named product. Yeah. 10, yeah. Now it reads a little unclear. I took it to mean he was doing a running product of all of these. It may mean that he's not. I will be more specific if I'm asking you to do this type of problem. But of course, remember, you're not going to code anything on the quiz. You're just going to select the one that works correctly. And I will make sure that I'm more clear than he is in the book on that. Okay. Bottom line is he's using product to get out of the while loop, as long as product is less than 100. Okay. Okay, let's look at number 3. I think we've done number 3. Write a for loop that displays the following set of numbers: 0, 10, 20, 30, up to 1,000. So for x in range, I want to start at 0. I want to go to 1,000, which means I've got to go to 1,001 because it won't do this last number. It goes to the less than that number. And we're incrementing by 10. There we go. And the one I was referring to that we did before was number 7, where we had the display 10 rows of 15 characters. Remember, we had to do 2 loops for that. 10 rows. Of 15 characters. And remember, we printed the character. Okay. And we wanted to make sure that the end was a blank, right? So all the characters would stay on the same line. And then in between each line, we every 15 we put a new line. So it was something like that. Okay. So I guess the question could be then, how many hashtags got printed? Remember, we multiply these two things together, so 150 of them got printed when we did this. Okay. You don't have to worry about 8 and 9. We're not going to do any validation on the quiz, so we're not going to worry about that. Let's look at chapters 5, the multiple choice on chapter 5. So if I come over, okay. A group of statements that exist within a program for the purpose of performing a specific task, that's a function, 1C. A design technique that helps to reduce the duplication of code within a program and is a benefit of using functions is A, code reuse. Remember in the video I gave you several advantages of using functions. Code reuse was one of those. 2A. 3, the first line of a function definition is known as the header. 3D. How do you execute a function? You call it 4B. We're not going to do 5 or 6. What kind of variable is created inside a function? That's a local variable, B. 7B. What is the part of the program in which a variable may be accessed? The scope, 8C. What is the piece of data that's sent to a function? That's the argument, 9A. What is the variable that receives that data when a function is called? That's the parameter, 10B. You don't have to do 11. You don't have to do 12. You don't have to do 13. 14. This standard function returns a random integer. Randint. 14b. You don't have to do 15. You don't have to do 16. 17. This statement causes a function to end and sends back a value. Return 7d or 17d. We're not doing 18. 19. This type of function returns either true or false. Boolean 19c. We're not doing 20. Okay, so let's look at the true false. We're not doing 1. Number 2, functions make it easier for programmers to work in teams. That's true. That was one of our advantages. Function names should be as short as possible. That's false. Our rule is that they start with a verb, okay? Calling a function and defining a function mean the same thing. That's false. When you define a function, you have DEF in front of it and give it a name. When you call it, you just give the name and put something in parentheses if it needs it. We're not doing 5. We're not doing 6. 7. A statement in one function can access a local variable in another function. That's false. Those local variables are local to those functions. The scope of those variables is just that function. In Python, you cannot write functions that accept multiple arguments. That's false. You're doing that on the homework. You don't have to do 9. You don't have to do 10. You don't have to do 11. 12. You do not need to have an import statement to use the functions in the random module. That's false. You always need an import statement. You don't need 13. 14. A function in Python can return more than one value. That's true. You're doing that on the homework as well. And you don't need 15. So if I look at the algorithm workbench here, let's look at number 1. Let me get, okay. You write a function named times 10. That accepts an argument. Now, when it says accepts, that means something's in parentheses and displays the product of its argument multiplied by, oh, that's basically the same problem he had for the other one. That's okay. So it accepts the number and it prints number times 10. And if I wanted to call it, I'd say times 10 and give it a number. Pretty straightforward. Number 2, he gives us a header wants us to call it. So all you do is you give the name of it and give it a value. Okay. Number 3, he gives us a header. And then he gives us the call. And he wants to know what the value of A, B, and C is. Remember, they go in order. So A gets 3, B gets 2, and C gets 1. They're in order of the way they're listed. Okay, the next couple of ones, he asks us what's being printed. So let me put this on here real quick. Calls a function and passes it in X and Y, and then print them again. All right, so if we look at this, the first thing that happens is he comes in and he prints X and Y. So when I print that, remember a comma gives us a space. So it's 1 space Y, 3.4. Okay, remember a comma gives a space. Then he calls change us, X and Y, and A becomes 1 and B becomes 3.4. But then he changes it to 0. So he prints A and B, and that prints 0 space 0. When this is finished, it comes back up, and the only thing left to do is print XY, and the XY inside main is 1 and 3.4. So you get 1 and 3.4 again, okay? Remember, once I pass them in as values here, I can do anything I want to them, but it doesn't change what the original values were in main. He's trying to see if you know the difference between local and all of that when you pass these variables back and forth. Now, you need to make sure that you account for the way it's being formatted. Here, this allows for a space between the numbers. Okay? If I had done something like this, there would be no space between those numbers, right? So make sure that you understand how things are printed and how they'll look. If I ask you what's going to be printed, I want you to pick the exact one. Okay, let's look at the, where are we? You don't have to do 5. All right, number 6, generate a random number in the range of 1 through 100 and assign it to rand. Easy enough. To do that, I've got to import random. Rand to be, and you have to say where it is, and you have to say what you're doing, and we said 1 to 100. There you go. Okay. Remember that in the random generator, these are inclusive. Number 7, I have this statement. And he's asking us to write the function half. He wants us to write this function. So you give it the name and you say what you need. And obviously it's returning something because it says result equals. So I know it has to return something. And he's just having the number. Okay. Number 8, a program contains the following function definition. All right, so I have this. He wants us to call it with 4. Now, this returns something, so I know that when I call it, I've got to have it equal something. So I'll say cube 4. So when it returns 64, it'll be stored in result.
So I had a question.
Yep.
Does main matter what order it was? So like in the first equation up here, you had main, and then you had a different function change us. So does main have to be at the last block in the sentence, the define main? It doesn't have to be that.
When we turn in our homework, I want it to be like we've been doing. I only did this because that's what he did in the book.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter what the order is as long as the call is last.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
But I would like ours to be all the functions and then the main and then the call to main. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. What can I get first? Okay. That's pretty good for algorithm workbench. Make sure you know how to write little things like this. As I said, we're not writing code on the quiz, but you should be able to recognize it. So if I were to ask you, how would I generate a random number between 1 and 100 and store it, you'd select something like this for the answer, okay? Remember, we only did rand int. So any other function would not be acceptable because we didn't cover any others. All right. Okay. Let's look at our review sheet. And there we go. All right. Now, from homework 2, the only things that pertain to this quiz are number 1 and 2, because we're not putting files on this. We're going to save that. Okay, what's a counter while? What's a sentinel while? And when do you use a while? Okay, which while do you use? A counter while actually counts, right? You started at a number and you add 1 to it or 2 to it or whatever you're trying to add to it. Remember, the counter while is set the counter, check the counter, change the counter. In a sentinel while, you have some number that you're looking for, like -1. As long as it's not -1, you're going to run the loop. So when you're doing a sentinel while, you read the value, you check the value, and you read the value again. All right? You would use a counter while when you know how many there are. If you know exactly there's 10 grades, you know it's a counter while because you can count to 10. If you don't know how many there are, or they don't know how many times they want to run the loop, you're going to have to use a sentinel value and tell them when you're finished, type in -1, so you'll know to finish the loop. Just make sure you understand the difference between those two and when you'd use each one. Write a while loop that reads in 5 float numbers and adds them up. Okay, what kind of while loop would I use? Well, I know there's exactly 5 numbers, so that's a counter while. So let's come in here. I'm going to start it at 1. I'll count less than or equal to 5. I want to read in a number. I said it was a float. What's I doing with them? Add them up. Okay, this is our typical add problem. For every add problem, I've got to have a total set to 0, and I want to add the total. And the last thing I do in the while loop is change the counter. My print total, I don't know. Okay. When we're doing an accumulation of a value, this is an accumulator, okay? Total is our accumulator. All right. Remember, it's always set to 0 to start with. Let's look at the next one. Rewrite it as a for loop. Okay, easy enough. I still need my accumulator. For, and we can use count as the name, it doesn't matter. I want 5 numbers. I don't need to add to the counter because this does it automatically for me. And what are the values it's using? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, it starts, if there's just one number here, it starts at 0, and it always goes to 1 less than that number. Write a sentinel control loop that keeps reading in an integer until the user types in -999. I want to add the integers and keep track of how many integers were read. Okay, so this is a sentinel because I'm going to use that flag of -999. So I did want the total, so that'll be my accumulator. So when you're doing a sentinel, you have to read that's what we were doing, right? Add and keep track. Okay. All right. And we read again. Now that's your sentinel while you're looking for -99. Now the only thing I haven't done to this is count how many times I'm doing the loop. I need a counter for that. So I'll do count. That'll start at 0. Okay. So when I first enter the loop, I'll add 1 to count. So that every time I come around that loop, I'm adding 1 to count, and I'll know how many times I was in the loop. And then, assuming somewhere, I would print total and count. Okay. Write a program that prints every third number. 1, 4, 7, 10. Use a while loop and a for loop. Okay. Every third number. We'll do the while loop first. So I'm going to start. Now I know how many there are, right? I'm just going to use this as the way to kick out. I know I need to go up to 22. All right. So we're going to start the counter at 1, while counter less than equal 22. Because I already know how many there are going to be. I want to print the counter. And then I want to walk through and I want to do 1 every third number. So, easy enough. You add 3 to the counter. So I get 1, 4, 7, so forth and so on. Okay. So I set it, and here's my check, and then I changed it. And then they asked us to do that in the for loop. For counter in range. It's got to start at 1. Now I want it to go to 22, but in a range, I have to be 1 number higher than the number I want, and I'm counting by 3. Just make sure you can go back and forth between counter whiles and for loops. Okay. Write a program that reads in sales amount, keeps a running total of sales, prints the total and the commission. And I'm going to run until the user types in quit. Okay, we did one of these, and there was one in the book of these as well. So I want to add the total, so I need a total variable. And I want to set up a variable to continue, right? Because I'm going to let them type in a word, not a number. While continue loop equals yes. So as long as that says yes, I want to read in a number. It's sales, so it would need to be a float. I add it to the total. Okay. And then I want to know if he wants to enter in another sales. So I've got to ask them more. And you can say yes or quit, however you'd like to word it. All right. And this time they'll either type in yes to continue or they'll type in quit, which will stop. Okay. And oops. Yeah, oops. There we go. Okay. And I said there was a commission of 10%, and we wanted to print the total. Point 2F. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is really the same thing. It's a flag. We're letting the user tell us. It's just we've picked out a word for a flag instead of a number like -1 or -999. And then I think I said rewrite it to run a negative sales value. Okay. So we still have, yeah.
Would commission be commission is equal to total times 0.1 or?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Good catch. Okay. Now, let me state that if I say which one of these problems solves the question I'm asking you, I won't deliberately do something like that. One of those they'll all run, only one will give the correct answer. Okay. So yeah, my mistake. So if I do it with the minus number, okay. So remember, you have to read it in. Then you check it. Then I would add it up. Read it again. Then we just do all the other stuff we just did. So when I'm doing the Sentinel flag, it's read, check, and read again. Okay. I can see that on the quiz, I would say something like, which one of these snippets of code or programs or whatever will add up an indeterminate number of cells, meaning I don't know how many there are, which means I'd have to use a flag or some sort of text to get me out of the loop. And you would just go and look and see which one it is. And you can use scratch paper to work through them, okay? And just pick the right one. So you don't have to write the code, but you do have to be able to recognize if the code works correctly or not. Okay. We rewrote it. Write function stock that accepts as input the name of stock, the value, and the number of shares. Okay, so let's talk about this because I'm getting lots of questions about homework functions, okay? And we need to reiterate what was said in the videos. When the description says a function accepts something, that means it's in parentheses. So we have stock and it accepts the name, the value, and the shares, okay? Look what it says. Accepts as input, the name of the stock. Accepts as this, all right, in parentheses. If it's to be read by the user, I will say it will be input from the user, okay? This one just wants to return the value, so value times shares. Easy enough. Let's see. Define tax, accepts as input arguments, accepts as input, tax percentage and value. All right, def tax. I can call it percentage, I guess, and value, and it returns percentage times that. Just make sure you're clear that when it says accepts, there's something in parentheses here. When it says returns, you better have a return statement in there. Now, if I were to call these, how would I call them? Well, when something returns a value, I better have an equals somewhere on that so that when I give it the value and the shares and it returns 100, it's stored in a variable. Same for tax. It's called, I don't want to use the variable. The method's already called tax, or function's already called tax. 105 times 100 bucks, like that. Okay. Notice that when he, because I copied a couple of these from his sample, these really should be things like calculate stock. Always start hours with a verb. Yeah. Okay. But not everybody does that. Okay. Okay, what happens when you import a module? You get access to any of the functions that are in that module. And how do you import a module? Well, we've done that. That's easy enough. Import random. Okay. And then how do you use it? Remember, you always have to say where it is and what it is. And then whatever parameters you need, arguments you need. Okay. Fairly easy. You're not going to be writing any modules or anything like that on the quiz. You just need to know how to use them. Okay. And we've only done one that's built in. That's random. So it's pretty narrowed down to one function. Write function square that reads in an integer and inputs the... Okay, now look at this one. This one says reads in an integer. It does not say except. So it has nothing in parentheses. So we have square, and it reads in an integer. Returns the square. Okay. How would I call that one? Exactly that. Nothing in parentheses. Okay. So you want to make sure that you understand the difference between what's being read versus what's accepted. All right. Okay, here's a couple of what's going to be printed. Let's look at this. Okay, so we have main and it's going to call add. So when it calls add, A becomes 3 and B becomes 2. Now it comes in here and B is 3. So now A's 3 and B's 3 inside add only. Then it adds them up and prints it. You get 6. When it returns, this is 6. That's fairly easy. Just note, what are A and B? They're local to the add function. What is result? It's local to the main function. I could not come up here and print main. I can't do that. I'm not main, result. I can't print result. Result is not visible inside add. It's only visible down here. So make sure you understand what's local. Remember, we're not doing any global, so that's not a problem. What about this? Okay. So obviously Emma's going to print 5 times. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I say 5 here, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I could have done this, and it would still been 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Just make sure you know the differences between having a range here, or just having one number here, or having a range in this here. What will that print? That will print Emma for number 2, Emma for number 4, and then I is 6, and you don't print this last one. It's always less than that number, so you only get Emma, Emma. Okay? So make sure that you understand how that works. All right? As usual, you'll have about half of them, 10 or so, coming from the things in the book. Multiple choice, true, false, checkpoints, workbench, that type of stuff. They'll come from the book. And the others will be similar things like this. Which piece of code solves this problem? What's going to be printed? If I wanted to write a function, which one would do this? That type of thing. Any questions about the worksheet? Okay. All right.
I have a question on what we'll print. So the last one we did, why is there not a equaling something in there? It just has B equals.
Oh, because he wants A to remain 3.
Oh, okay.
That's all. Yeah. Here he wanted to change B. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the homework. I'm getting some questions and we need to resolve these questions. Okay. So I did number 1 in class. All right. But for some reason, and I'm not sure why, people are turning in stuff that doesn't look like that. So let me get a new screen here. Now, I'm not going to do it in a while loop and a for loop. You have to, but I'll just do one of them. All right. So, you know, for x in range 1 to 6, right? You want to get the quantity. I'm just going to say read quantity. And then you're going to just have an if statement. If x equals 1, total plus equals quantity times 298. Now if x equals 2, total plus equals quantity times, I think it's 450, and so forth, etc. And then print. That's it. So I'm getting all sorts of interesting things, but I did this one in class, so you should be able to copy this and continue this, and then just turn it into a while loop, which would basically be a counter while, 1 to 5. Okay, so you want to make sure that you revisit that and understand what that was trying to do. But moving on, let's look at 2. We did this one as well, but I can tell that y'all are still having trouble understanding what I'm asking for. Notice that it says you're going to have 3 functions. Everybody understands that, okay? But I tell you that each function asks the user for the input required. It does not say the function accepts anything. All these functions will look like nothing in parentheses, because it doesn't say they accept anything. So they all will have nothing here. But what you'll do, for example, on this one, you'll read in principal rate and term. You'll read in and then you'll calculate the interest. And what does it say? Returns the calculated value, and you'll return. They're all going to look basically the same. The name with nothing in parentheses, read, all the information you need, calculate it, and return it. So a lot of folks are turning in things where they're doing this. You're putting things in parentheses. That's incorrect. That is not what the program says to do. Ask the user for the input and return the value. So don't do this, okay? They all basically look like this type of thing. So if you've done that, you want to go back and fix this so that it looks correct. Because I will check to see if you followed exactly what was asked.
I had a question. So on the last home, can I put the def count simple interest, this thing, in my interest function? Because that's what I did, and then I just, in my main regular function, I just had a equaling statement because I already returned it. So then I just finished that up in my main homework too. So I guess that was my question.
Whoa, whoa, okay, I gotta hit me with that again. Did you write the 3 functions?
Yes.
And you put them in their own module?
Yes, the interest module, yes.
Okay, all right, so then what did you do in main?
I just pretty much called the functions, and then I made it work that way.
Well, that's
not
what you're
in main, but in my main homework. I guess. I did how you did it in the example.
Well, you didn't do what?
No, what I said was I followed how you did it in the example. I just wanted to know where, if I could put the def calc simp interest, this part in my interest file, if that was okay. That was my question.
All the functions go in the interest file.
Okay, so like the read principal, that can go in the interest file as well?
Well, yeah, because it's inside a function.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, everything goes in there. Yeah. The only thing that doesn't go there, the only thing main does is print all this stuff out about enter 1 for this, enter 2 for that, enter 3, and lets them choose which one they want to run. That's all main does. Yeah. Okay. How do we know when to identify arguments in functions? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. I think you're asking what I just went over. If the function says accepts something, that means it has arguments in parentheses. If it says accepts, A-C-C-E-P-T, accept something, okay? And we're going to do one in just a minute. If it says ask the user for input, then there's basically nothing in parentheses. Okay, so let's move down and I'll show you another one. So if we looked at the one for 3, you have 2 functions, write file and determine major. Look at what write file says. It will accept a file name. That means it's got something in parentheses. Okay, so let's go look at that a minute. It will accept the file name. That means I've got something in parentheses. Call it whatever you want. Okay. And I tell you, and it'll write the data to the file. So that's a pretty easy function. You'll just have an out file, you open it. Now I have told you, okay, I did not. So I will enter in any name I want because main is going to ask that. Okay. So that's fine. So file name goes here because that's what I called it here. Okay. And we're going to write to it. You're just going to have outfile.write, and you're going to have a whole bunch of writefile.write statements to write all this data. That's all that system is. I mean, that's all that function is. It's hard coded. Don't ask the user for any of it. There is no user input in write file. Okay. So the first one would be Insy. The second one would be the 350. Remember, that's a number, so I've got to turn it into a string. Remember, I also need to always put a \n so everything gets on one line. Okay. And you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more of those kinds of statements, etc. And then outfile.close. That's a straightforward function. Okay. So then when you want to go to read it, what does it say that you're going to do for that one? Determine major. It accepts a file name and a major. So the minute it says it accepted something, that's in parentheses. So if I come down here, determine major, it accepts a file name and a major. That's how you know if there's anything in parentheses. Okay. Oops. Determine. All right. Now when I do that, what I've got to do is I've got to read the file and find that major in that file. So I've got to open it up. Of the file name, and I'm going to read this one. Okay. Now I'm going to let you read it, but you're going to basically have some sort of for loop or while loop or something to read the file. All right. And you're going to have to check for the major that you want to look for. All right. And you'll have to read the students, the number of students. You've got to do that piece. But what does it say at the end? Return the major and the number. So you'll return the major and the number of students. So it would appear that most of you aren't quite reading exactly what it's saying. Except means something's in parentheses, and return means you got to return something. In this one, we're returning more than one thing. Okay. Number 4. Write a program with 2 functions. You have write file and add numbers. Write file will accept an integer. Write file will accept an integer. Call it number, whatever you want. And it'll write that many random numbers to randnumbers.txt. Now, I've given you the name of the file. That's exactly the name of the file I want you to use. So don't read it in. Don't make it another number. Another name. That's what I want. So that would mean your out file is randnumbers.txt, and I want to write to it. It also says I want to write that many random numbers. All right. So if I want to loop through and write a random number for all of those, that sounds like a good for loop. Number. Right? I want this many of them. That was passed in. So I've got to generate a random number. So I have imported random. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say random.randint. And I said 1 to 30. So there's my number. Now I want to write it to a file. Write number to file. Okay. You'll do that for how many ever numbers they entered, and then you will close the file. That's all write file is doing. Okay. That's all it's doing. Then I said add numbers. We'll return the total of the numbers in the file. Notice it does not say add numbers accepts anything. Therefore, there is nothing in parentheses. Right. I just want to total the numbers in the file. So I have to get the file open. I should bring out open there. Okay. I'm going to total something up, so I'm going to need a total variable. And then I just got to go, through the file for every line in file. We had several ways of doing that in the videos. All right. You'll total the numbers. What did I say do? Return the total. That's all. So make sure that you know what accept means, or what read means, or what nothing means, and if you've got to return something. So when I look at main, okay, I'm going to have to input from user the number so I can pass it in. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to call write file with number. And then I'm going to call add numbers with nothing. But what happens to add numbers? It returns something. So I've got to say it equals something, right? And then print. So from what I'm seeing, everybody's writing way too much code for these things, okay? And you're repeating a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be repeated in your code segments, all right? Hardly any functions over 5 or so lines. So if you've got way too much code, look at it and make sure you aren't going off on the deep end somewhere with what you're trying to do. Remember, this is due by 11:59 tomorrow night. So you want to make sure you start putting it up there about 11:55, okay? Because it will shut down at 11:59. All right. Any questions about the homework? Any questions about this whole function accepts something or returns something? Remember, we accept, we give the parameters we accept. We return, we can return one thing or two things. Here we're returning two things. Okay. Okay, so all y'all have to do is put in some of these little loopy things, which we've got in the videos. I showed you several ways to read a file and to even read numerical files. All right, so you want to make sure that you look at those. Any problems? Okay, so the quiz is going to be Tuesday during regular class time. Works the same as before, 20 questions, that type of thing. Thursday, we're going to start chapter 7, which is lists. By the way, don't use lists on any of this homework. Lists cannot be used on homework 2. We haven't done them. You cannot do anything we have not covered. But anyway, we're going to start lists on Thursday of next week. And then, of course, we have spring break. So I'm not sure how far we'll get. I may have to put up a couple of videos or something after that and everything. But when we come back, we'll still have time for homework 3. I will post homework 3, though, this weekend, if you just want to see what it's going to be about. I should get that up this weekend. So we only have 1 week to go before spring break. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to that. And then I think we have about 7 weeks after that, something like that. Okay. Any questions about the homework or the quiz? Anything? I will be in office hours today at 11. Y'all are awfully quiet. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll hang out here for a little bit in case someone does have questions, but I'm finished with lecture part and everything. I'll take my screen away if anybody wants to show their screen.